Welcome to Netroots Nation. In just about a minute, we are going to have a live stream from New Orleans, so stay tuned. We have three wonderful guests: Gina Cooper, Netroots Nation founder, and of CooperStrategies.com. We also are going to speak with Celeste Drake from the AFL-CIO. She is the Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist. And our last and final guest will be Erin McKee, who is the South Carolina AFL-CIO President. Everybody today just heard from Senator Cory Booker as one of the keynotes at noon. So it's 2 o'clock. Let's get started for Activate Live. Welcome to this special edition of Activate Live from Netroots Nation in New Orleans, where organizers, activists, and communicators are meeting, networking, and brainstorming about grassroots activism and social justice. Now, this is the biggest Netroots ever, with 3,000 attendees, 175 sessions, and 400 speakers. It's in its 13th year, and we have the pleasure of speaking with the founder of Netroots, Gina Cooper, of Cooper Strategies. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. It's wonderful here, isn't it?
It is wonderful, and we are so glad that you started this great conference. Take us back 13 years. How did this all begin?
Oh gosh, it all began. It began on the blog Daily Kos, and Daily Kos back then, they had a section called Diaries, and it was after John Kerry had not won, and everybody was really sad, and it really started off as a very humble idea that we'd find a way to get together and all cry in our beers together, but it just kind of kept going and going and growing. And the idea got bigger. It's like, well, we need to highlight, some of these great things that people are doing, the great things that people are talking about. And it truly was organized online. And none of us really, I don't know that we had a plan going in.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, was there a mission?
No, the mission was to get together. And then the mission grew into not just getting together, but then starting to elevate some of these voices that we felt like were not getting heard. People were pretty upset with the mainstream media, and blogs were going to revolutionize how the media operated, and social media has come in, and that's happened as well. But I think what was really neat, and I think the thing that stands out to me most was just how in those early days, with no one really knowing each other and everybody just kind of coming together around this idea that we had conference calls. You didn't even have like webcams. That wasn't a thing. Smartphones, that wasn't a thing. And just going on and kind of like flogging it on the blog, saying like, hey, do you have an idea? Do you have something that you want to share? And what was really, I think to me, was the most inspirational thing was when we had that very first conference in Las Vegas, was how many people just actually showed up. I remember the night before going into the conference hall, and there was a reason that I was an online activist at the time. I was shy. I didn't really like being in front of crowds. I had never been on a stage before. I had never talked on a microphone before. I had managed to avoid even home video cameras. And I walked into the auditorium where we were going to have it, and I saw this huge stage and these two big TVs up on the wall. And my knees gave out in front of me. I thought, oh my God, what have I done to myself? But it was just so incredibly gratifying. The next day, Wednesday, just tons of people showed up. We didn't really know how to produce a show. People showed up to produce the show. We hadn't really planned for how we were going to stuff the swag bags. Like 30 volunteers just showed up and organized themselves and started doing it. And it was just absolutely glorious. It was just, I have been inspired. I was inspired before about the possibility of what technology would mean for democracy and how it was going to evolve and how it could, shorten the distance between people, voters and the people who represent them. And to actually see real people show up, that there were like people behind those pixels, was just absolutely incredible. I think there were around 800 people that showed up for that first conference, between 800 and 1,000, somewhere in there. We didn't really keep good records at that time.
That's amazing.
And it was as if everybody was a volunteer as well. I mean, they just, and it still is. Everybody pitches in. Everybody pitches in.
So how do you feel now, 13 years later, looking around as how much it has grown and how far technology has come.
On one hand, it's like absolutely gratifying to see that that so many people that began in many ways the way that I did, that they just kind of cared about the issues and wanted to speak up and wanted to have a voice. You know, those people started their own businesses to be able to, you know, work in politics. They became campaign managers. They started developing the first generation of social media strategy. And so to see how it's grown in that direction is really huge. To see how it's evolved in terms of its mission. You know, it started out really a little less diverse than it ought to have been. And to see now that the floor has been opened up and the forum has been opened up to, you know, many more ideas as it's grown, it's just really it's moving. It's moving.
Yeah.
It's hard not to get emotional about it, really.
Oh. I know we have a few photos of Netroots Nation, and you said it's grown so much and has become more diverse. I think something like 67% of the speakers are people of color.
Yes.
And it's not just about different types of people coming in, but different viewpoints as well. I think there's a union presence here. I counted almost 10 unions here as well. How does that make you feel that, you know, workers' voices are here as well?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I really need to give a shout out to Unite Here, because that our very first convention, I didn't know about how to event plan and to find a hotel and to fill out an RFP. And Unite Here was young then, and they came and they said, "Hey, can we help?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can help." And so the fact that it even like came off that very first time, I mean, you know, we owe that to the labor movement. And so to see that there's more and more of that presence here, I think it's super important. Yeah, it's awesome and cool, but it's also just super important because, you know, this conference still is sort of the center of how where technology is entering into politics for the progressive movement. And so that's an important bridge that needs to be built. You know, as technology industry is growing more and more, we need the presence of labor there to mitigate what's going to happen with the future of work and the future of everything.
Now you're with CooperStrategies.com,
right?
And you know you're in Silicon Valley. Can you mention a little bit to people just about how important it is that they stay vigilant online? Because it's so much different now in the atmosphere, that online atmosphere, than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of ways you have to remain vigilant. One way, and I think the most important way, and one of the ways I think Netroots Nation is, you know, is addressing it through having a more diverse group of people here, is you've got to make sure that you're not just talking inside your bubble. And so being able to be aware of, you know, what it is that your different social media feeds are giving you, being aware that that is not really the whole world out there, and that, you know, it's you know, sort of an algorithmic manipulation that's happening. So first being aware of that, being aware that there's information out there that you're not seeing, and information that's maybe being promoted to you more so than would happen just in a natural way. The other thing, and one of the things that I work on now, is I work with a group called Startup Policy Lab. They're startuppolicylab.org, and they are doing some really important work around public comments online on government websites. It's called the Truth in Public Comments Project. And we know that there are malicious actors that are out there trying to manipulate not just our perception of the world, but also how government understands its people. And so one of the projects that we worked on was we did a survey of 500,000 different email addresses associated with public comments on government websites, and asked people like, hey, is this your comment? Did you actually do that? And it was over the issue of net neutrality, which was, you know, people know that there were a lot of fake comments there. And what we found is that, and this was 500,000 different email addresses. What we found was that 88% of like the pro-repeal comments were using stolen email addresses. People
80%.
are like 88%. 88%.
Wow, 88%.
88%. And so that's like really huge. And it's important that we know this, and it's important actually that government knows this. What's really fascinating about this whole issue is that there's actually no law that says it's illegal to use an email address that's not yours and attribute a fake comment to it. That's not illegal. There's actually no one in government that is responsible for going on government comment websites and being able to say that, being able to distinguish between what are real and what are fake comments. And this is just, it's astounding. It's astounding to me that's happening. And so, there's lots of ways that, technology touches everything. It touches everything in society. It touches our politics. It touches our government. It touches the relationships that we have with one another. And, I think that at the very basic level, and this goes back to the founding of Netroots Nation, you kind of had the right to know if who it is that you're speaking to on the other side is a human being or not. And, there are things that we can do to get ahead of the malicious actors that are out there trying to manipulate us.
Well, we are so thankful that you took the time out to speak with us. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, thank you so much for asking. It's really great to be here, and it's great to see the good work you're doing and that everyone else is doing as well.
Great. Thanks so much. And you too can join the conversation. Join the conversation online via Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. You can comment on this video and let us know if you have ever attended Netroots Nation and how you can help your community to educate, organize, and advocate. Are you out there already doing that? Let us know what you're doing in your community. You can hit reply on Twitter, or you can use live chat on YouTube. Well, trade is a huge issue for workers, whether you're union or not, and we advocate for fair trade, not free trade, but not everyone understands the difference. Joining us now to talk about trade and globalization is Celeste Drake of the AFL-CIO. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Okay, we hear about free trade so much, whether it's on TV, whether it's on the radio. We're reading about free trade, and a lot of publications make it sound like a good thing. But why is it so important that workers know about fair trade?
It's really important. So first of all, free trade is one of these terms that's sort of like right to work. It doesn't really mean like what it sounds like it means, because if you just hear the term free trade, I mean, well, gosh, who doesn't love eating bananas from Guatemala or coffee from Colombia? Of course we like trade, but what are the terms of trade? And so those who advocate free trade usually mean trade under rules that are written by and for the big global corporations. So you don't have very strong protections, if any, for labor rights, for the environment, for the ability of us to get together as citizens and put in place public protections. And you do have very strong protections for corporations, for their investments, for their property, for their profits. So that's what they call free trade. Fair trade is how we say, we do want that same coffee, those same bananas, the iPhones from China, whatever it is, but we want terms that are fair for people and the planet. So the strongest protections go to working people, the freedom to join a union, the freedom to collectively bargain, safety in the workplace, freedom from discrimination in the workplace, all of those things, plus protections for clean air, clean water, the kinds of things that make life livable. Oh, and by the way, we ought to be able to make laws and rules to keep companies responsible. The kinds of things they're trying to escape from their rules. Fair trade says, no, we're all in this together, and we're going to create a set of rules that work for all of us.
I know the AFL-CIO does a good job online of pointing out these issues to us. What are some resources that people at home can do if they want to do research and find out which companies are fair trade companies?
That's hard to do. But there are a few things that you can do. Labor 411 is a website. People can just go Google Labor 411, and it will tell you firms that actually have unions in the workplace. Now, as you know, probably they're not always the best employers, but they are employers where at least if the workers feel like they're not being treated fairly, they can fight back. You can also look for international products that are fair trade certified, and again, there's some controversy about these not being totally perfect programs, but certainly they're better than programs that don't make the certification, because really what you want are goods and services that are made, whether they're made by one of your brothers and sisters here in the US or by a brother and sister in Guatemala or Bangladesh, where those workers are free, if they want to join a union, to fight for better wages, better benefits, safety in the workplace, all those conditions that you want. And if that's happening here, but around the world, that actually lifts us all up. And that's what we want. That's really what fair trade is. You can't just protect the workers in the US, because then if nobody else is protected, we know exactly what will happen. It's what's happening now. Outsourcing, exploitation, abuse, and that's not good for them, that's not good for us.
You brought up a huge issue about safety and health. I mean, that's the first thing I think of when I think of unions, because we don't want workers dying on the job. We want workers to come home safely.
Absolutely. And one of the things that the AFL-CIO has done that I think I'm so proud to work there when I think about this is in Bangladesh, which is sort of the workplace of the world when it comes to apparel. There was a terrible tragedy where over 1,000 workers died because a building collapsed. And just a couple of years before that, it had been over 100 workers in a particularly damaging fire. Both of these things happened even though we know how to build buildings so that they don't fall down, even though that we know how to make workplaces safe so that workers can get to the fire escapes. And the employers there were not doing it. They were treating workers, you know, the way maybe they treated American workers 150 years ago. Well, why? Because they're poor? Because they're in a different country? No, everyone has a right to be safe on the job, no matter how poor their country. Everybody has the basic right to join a union, to be free from discrimination. Now, other things come as countries grow and develop and their economy changes and they become more productive, but there are fundamental human rights, and one of them is the right to be safe on the job. If you're going to work and you know that building could fall down on you at any minute, your life is totally insecure. You are really powerless, and we have to stop that, and we know how to, and it's not a luxury. It's a human right.
That's right. Workers' rights are human rights, are civil rights, and you know, there are brothers and sisters no matter what country they're in. I can't imagine that happening with a building collapsing in the United States and workers, anyone, being up in arms. It seems like such a double standard.
Exactly, and you have employers then arguing, well, you know, but the women who worked there were somehow empowered because they had a job and it's better than the life they would have lived otherwise. And that's really the wrong comparison. First of all, I think it's hard to argue that if you're killed because your workplace falls on top of you, it's better than anything. But sort of these false choices between rural poverty and urban poverty, and that's all they can have. No, there's another choice. They can have a decent job with decent wages and a voice in the workplace. And when people try to deny that that's a real choice, it's because they have an agenda. And they have an agenda to disempower workers and pay exploitive wages. And that's what the labor movement's all about. It's saying we have other choices and we're going to take them.
How can people at home contact their Congress people, representatives, senators, and what's the best way to contact them to let them know that we can't stand for this?
Great question. So the best way to contact your member of Congress is either a phone call or a handwritten letter. You know, the old-fashioned snail mail with a stamp. They get thousands upon thousands upon thousands, you know, of the email petitions every day. And some offices are better than others at really trying to respond to them and respond to the specific questions asked. But you just become one of 1,000 people maybe who sent that particular petition. If you send in something handwritten or you take the time to make a phone call, it counts for more, and they're going to listen a little more. So that's really important, and it's easy to do. You can just Google their numbers online. Often they could go to the machinist website or another website, and you might have a click to call function where you guys look up the number for them. And if they want to join the AFL-CIO's trade activist list, and we don't spam and we don't bother people too much, but they can text TRADE to 235-246, and we'll alert them when there is a time to call or send a petition or do something.
Say that again, text TRADE to
235-246.
Okay, all right. Anything else you'd like to mention?
The machinists have been really great, so all your members should know you guys are a champion on trade and have been working really hard and particularly debunking this notion that Harley Davidson is leaving because of trade enforcement. You know, that's something that the press keeps repeating and keeps repeating. And we all know this was something that they were planning on for a long time. And we've got to push back on that, because the media is not our friend right now on the trade issue. They just want to say trade enforcement is awful and it's a trade war. And we just want to say, no, what we want is fair trade. And that means sometimes you have to enforce, but you have to do it smart. And the president isn't always doing it in a particularly smart way. So he needs to be pushed, Congress needs to be pushed, they all need to be pushed to do the right thing.
Do the right thing and tell the truth.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, you can join the conversation as well. Let us know what you think about trade and globalization, fair trade versus free trade, and what you're doing in your community to educate your coworkers about the effects of outsourcing and offshoring of jobs. We'd like to thank all the people that are already commenting and sharing. Bill M. Kirby, George Alcott, also Matt Fernald saying solidarity forever. The union makes us strong. AFL-CIO solidarity. Jay Brandenburg, Mike Grousman. I will always remain a union member. Thank you for that, Mike. We are so glad. Fabian's watching, and Ernie Young as well. Marvin Thompson, David Avilas. You know, thank you so much for everyone that is commenting here. We have a lot of union strong people out there. Adriana Picasso, Brian Murray, Roger Parslin, Andy Houndshell. Thank you so much. Well, our next guest has worked very closely with us on our efforts in South Carolina, but she's actually not here yet. So we are actually waiting to see if Erin McKee is going to be here. We're at Netroots Nation. If you're just joining us, Netroots Nation started out 13 years ago with Gina Cooper, was the founder, and she wanted a place for bloggers to get together and talk about how they can make the world a better place, whether it came to how to make the environment better, how to make workplace conditions better. Early on, she had unions getting involved. And here in New Orleans, there are almost 10 unions that are here as well. We've seen people here from the Steelworkers, from Unite Here, from CWA. The Machinist Union has a delegation here as well. There are trainings going on, panel discussions, keynote speeches about how to really involve with grassroots activism as well. So Erin, who I mentioned, is the president of the South Carolina AFL-CIO, and we just want to thank her for all the work that she has done. She actually had a letter to the editor that was today in the Post and Courier in South Carolina. And this is it here. If you'd like to go read it, the headline is Boeing Workers Used Their Right to Vote. And she kind of sets the record straight on what the governor of South Carolina was saying, and also, you know, what the attorney general was saying, because they were calling it a labor dispute, and it was not a labor dispute. It was basically workers saying that they had a right to join a union, and they voted. This unit of workers voted to join a union. So go read that letter to the editor from Erin McKee, the president of South Carolina AFL-CIO, and we're so glad that she wrote that and is standing up for the workers there. That's where we had recently organized the flight line workers at Boeing. So, you know, they're trying to improve their working conditions and have a voice on the job. So we'll bring you more news about that, not only from South Carolina, but elsewhere around the country and across North America. So we have been bringing you updates from Netroots Nation this week. If you are in South Carolina, you can comment right now to make your voice heard. You can comment on this video on Facebook. You can reply to this stream on Twitter. You can use live chat on YouTube as well. I'm going to look around one more time to see if I see Erin McKee, and I do not see her, but if she comes around later or even tomorrow, perhaps we can bring her to you tomorrow, so we can find out more about, you know, well, we know why she wrote the letter to the editor, but we can get more details on what she's hearing in South Carolina, because she's talking to workers on the ground through the AFL-CIO there and that state federation. Well, Netroots Nation is going to continue for one more day. Much of it is being live streamed, so check it out online if you weren't able to be here in New Orleans. But live from New Orleans, I'm Tanya Hutchins for Activate Live, and we'll see you tomorrow.